Good morning, everyone. This day, 49 years ago, I was born in Paarl in the Boland, and a very interesting life followed afterwards. And next year, I'm looking forward to the big 5-0, and I don't know what that's going to be like, what this next year will hold in store for me. But today, I'm bringing you an interview that I did yesterday with Dr Beate Setzer. And just so that you know, she contacted me some time ago while I was in tour in Gauteng. She's been following my work for some time, and she told me how she felt about what had happened in South Africa and around the world. And she has obviously been in contact with many professionals around the world, and she's been following many professionals around the world, and she will give her perspective on what happened to us over the last 6 months in this exclusive interview. I'm sure she will go on to be interviewed by many more people. I've encouraged her to start her own YouTube channel, and we'll see what happens with regards to that, and I will still encourage her to do that. But I really want to thank Dr Beate Setzer for taking this time out to talk to the people of South Africa. And it's all about bringing you professional truth, and truth that comes from people that have a different perspective to the rest of the mainstream out there, and certainly government. And I think this is very important, and I really want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video. It's just over 50 minutes long, so it takes time. So I do ask you to make time for this and then watch when you have that time. Please share this with friends and family so that this information can get out there. I encourage you to download this video and to share it on various platforms and applications. Thank you very much for your support. Our channel should reach 20,000 subscribers this weekend, if not today, and it'll be a great birthday present if that happens. So once again, thank you very much for your support, and thank you for caring about your life firstly, and secondly about South Africa.
My name is Beate Setzer. I'm a general practitioner. I studied at Wits, graduated in 1986, and have been in Cape Town since 1990. I'm sitting here because I am extremely concerned about the mass hysteria which has been caused by misinformation being spread. And I don't know how to fix it. Based on the information that was available early on, I put together a summary that was published on our CPC Qualicare newsletter at the end of May, where it was already known that the mortality rate of this virus was less than 0.5, and some put it as low as 0.2. And that was all over the world, which puts it into the category of a moderate to severe flu mortality. The 3 weeks of lockdown should have been sufficient for the government to verify the figures that were already available then. What I've seen happening is that we are quarantining healthy people based on questionable positive tests.
Yeah, maybe you can speak about the PCR test and how the PCR test is questioned. Many people are questioning the efficacy of the actual test being used to verify that you're positive for the SARS-CoV-2 virus.
The PCR test, the definition is available on Wikipedia, and it's actually sufficient to inform you that it looks for snippets of a virus, of the genetic material of the virus, which is allegedly specific to COVID-19. The first PCR test was developed by Christian Drosten at the Charité, based on social media reports passed his way that there was a SARS-like virus in Wuhan. He then had a look at the material available in the data bank and put together a test which was then marketed to the World Health and used widely throughout Germany, and I'm not sure where else. I have since found out that there's currently about 300 different PCR tests available worldwide. There's no standardization amongst the tests. It's like a black box. You don't know which genetic sequences they are checking for. If you pick up a genetic sequence and the test is positive, it does not tell you whether you found a whole virus, whether you found a fraction of the virus, whether you found a dead cell with a virus or virus material. It doesn't tell you how much virus there is. It does not tell you whether the person is well or sick. And it cannot do that.
Yeah.
The person who developed the PCR test did not develop this for diagnostics. If you use a PCR test for diagnostics, it needs to be standardized.
Okay. So in other words, you can't have a whole lot of different tests.
You need to standardize the number of replications that you have of that virus before it tests positive, so that you can extrapolate from that to viral material.
Okay.
So this is not happening. We're using it to define people that have no symptoms, no illness, and put them into quarantine.
Yeah, and we need to question why that's happening. I mean, why do you think the public would just accept something like this?
Lack of knowledge.
Okay.
Which would extend to the professionals, because I'm a doctor, I'm not a scientist, and you would actually have to have knowledge from the scientists about the PCR test.
Okay.
Why the public is accepting this is because of fear.
Okay.
That's what was used to get the population to submit into lockdown without a murmur. There's a created mass hysteria fueled by media.
What did you think about the media articles that you've seen? initially and later?
I saw the media publicizing corona patients, sick patients. I saw evidence of the media putting out deliberate lies.
Do you think it was a script? Because around the world it seemed very similar, the messages that came out. Because the media was gagged. I remember in South Africa, when this lockdown happened, one of the things that happened is the media couldn't say anything without getting approval for what they are publishing on this.
Well, that's censorship.
Yeah, and I know the medical professionals were also gagged from saying anything. Anyone involved with the coronavirus response could not speak out.
Well, so it was governmental information only.
Basically.
It was censored by the government, and what I see happening now is still government propaganda.
Okay. Now, what to you is the truth? I mean, if you look at how do you define a case, a coronavirus case? I mean, how do you define cases in general?
I was taught to define a case as a patient with clinical signs and symptoms.
Okay.
That's a case.
Not a test.
And we would use tests to further define the problem.
Okay.
Not to define a case.
Okay.
I was also not told or not taught to quarantine the healthy. We've only ever quarantined the sick.
A lot of people have said that. I've seen that come out from many other doctors.
It's not just the doctors that know this. This is the history of mankind. This is what we've done. As far back as we can see and remember and have record of, we've only ever quarantined the sick.
Which makes sense.
The healthy.
So I know this is a difficult question, but why do you think it's different this time?
We've had, this is not the first pandemic that has been declared.
Okay.
A pandemic was declared in 2009 that was notable, which was the H1N1 swine flu.
Yes.
I picked up on the government website for COVID, I picked up on their definition of a pandemic.
I would like you to cover that actually. I think that's very important.
The definition that I found on our own government website said that a pandemic is defined as a novel infectious agent with worldwide spread, but it did not need to be particularly dangerous or have a high mortality rate.
But wasn't that part of what actually happened before? That you needed a high mortality rate?
Well, my ears pricked up on that because I did not know this.
Okay.
I did not know about that definition. I subsequently found out that that definition was changed in 2009.
Oh, okay.
And the threshold for calling a pandemic was lowered then. So the definition changed from an agent, a novel agent with worldwide spread that needed to be dangerous or have a high mortality, to one that did not.
Okay.
That's how they managed to call a pandemic in 2009 and again now.
Wow. Now that is quite significant. It's a significant change in 2009.
Yes.
To go from something that would kill people, because this is the fear that's been put into the public, right?
Yes.
at the beginning of this pandemic, it was all about the death rate, and
Yes.
when now it's all about the cases. I just see cases being
Yes,
pushed now,
it's
not death, because the
it's
death
odd.
didn't come.
Well, I see that in all the media. It's happening in New Zealand, it's happening in Australia, it's happening in Germany, it's happening in Austria, and it's happening here. That these figures of cases are being presented to the public as if those were sick people that we need to worry about.
Mm. And I mean, if this PCR test, which is highly suspicious based on what they claim it can do, even if it was correct, it still doesn't mean that the person is sick, right?
That's correct.
And I don't think a lot of people understand this.
How would they understand this?
Mm.
They haven't been taught this.
Yeah. So can you perhaps describe the difference between someone that is infected and someone that actually presents with symptoms? Just because you as a doctor, if someone came in here, what would you typically do?
I normally take a history and then I take a full examination. I do a full examination which will include a temperature, a blood pressure, a pulse, usually a respiratory rate and other things.
Okay.
Listening, looking for lymph glands, just checking the patient clinically.
Okay.
And it's easy enough to pick up a sick patient based on this rather than on tests.
Okay.
If I have a very sick patient, the patient would be sent to hospital, and once they get to hospital they will normally be subjected to more tests.
Okay.
So the usual diagnosis would be made on signs and symptoms only, not on tests.
So you don't actually. So why do you think the
in
testing?
my practice.
Yeah. So why do you think this testing was such a big drive? And I know Cyril Ramaphosa in his speech last night said that testing will now become a mainstream thing again, and especially antibody testing.
I can just see that these tests are being used to keep the level of fear as high as possible.
Okay. So, yeah. And a lot of people have gone for tests or tried to get tests initially, and it was expensive, wasn't it? I mean, many of the
Yes.
tests weren't for free. Do you
Yes.
have any idea how much they cost? I mean, I
Something
have no
like
idea.
800 Rand?
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay, so there was a lot of money to be made as well.
Oh, absolutely.
And who would be making that money? I mean, who would do these tests?
Well, the first person that marketed the first test, Christian Drosten from the Charité in Berlin.
Mm-hmm.
His friend owns a company called Tipmobile.
Okay.
So how that is not conflict of interest, I do not know.
Okay.
They were marketing the test.
Well, we know throughout this pandemic, even our president admitted that people were making money while not providing the actual services. And I'm not saying that this is the case with these tests, but I know that at some stage they said that the general public won't be tested anymore. There's not enough tests available around
Yes.
the world.
And at one stage the lab told us to stop testing, and they put out certain criteria,
Okay.
which was quite a relief.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Then, so we stopped testing excessively unless we really had to.
So why do you think they would do a rollout? And it sounded like an experiment based on what Cyril Ramaphosa said last night, a rollout of these antibody tests. I know this happened in America, and based on the results, the people said that most people have had the virus already and nothing happened to them. This is not as serious. How effective is an antibody test? Do you know?
It's only part of the immunity. We don't.
Okay.
It doesn't. It's not the whole immunity. We've got antibodies, that can happen fairly quickly after an infection, and they can also wane again after an infection. And at this stage, we're not sure how long these antibodies last, but there is evidence that has come out that shows that we have T-cell immunity towards coronaviruses, and there is cross-immunity between this coronavirus strain and other coronaviruses that we have been exposed to since our childhood. And that is the reason why so many people are either asymptomatic or have no symptoms at all.
Well, that seems to have been the case in South Africa. Remember,
and other parts of the world, including Germany.
Okay. Well, in South Africa, I remember initially they were surprised and stumped that we didn't see a sudden rise in cases. In fact, it took 2 months before they saw the rise they expected, and they didn't understand why or how this was possible.
Well, we went into lockdown before we even had community spread. And it's a respiratory virus, so it will follow the general trends that we have every single winter. Bell-shaped curve that then comes down.
And
at the end of the flu season where we are right now. And it's different across the country in different provinces. So, yeah, they have their own flu season, which just sort of lags behind ours a little bit.
So what do you think about the fact that only 1 case of flu was presented in Gauteng?
Well, I'm not sure how they even notify flu. Flu is not a notifiable illness.
Okay.
I don't notify flu. I diagnose flu clinically, and I have had cases that had flu.
Okay.
I must have had maybe 1 coronavirus patient where I thought this was coronavirus. At that stage we didn't have to test, so that was not confirmed. How do we even differentiate between influenza and coronavirus? Because you're going to get symptom overlap.
So there has to be new symptoms presented that's not typical of the flu.
Well, they gave us a list of symptoms.
Did the GPs get anything from the World Health Organization at all?
Not directly.
Okay.
Yeah, passed on via other bodies. Yeah.
Okay.
Dr Beate has written a book called Corona Wrong Alarm, translated from the German.
Okay.
Wolfgang Wodak has his own website. Some of it is in English. Medical Detectives. He was an important witness in the 2009 pandemic of H1N1 swine flu. He chaired the audit into what happened there, and there are several statements available on a website, PACE website, which was quite an eye-opener. John Ioannidis is the most cited scientist in the world. Professor Levitt is a Nobel Prize winner.
Yeah.
What concerned me is how many videos were removed.
Okay.
Anyone.
And this from professionals?
Professionals. There were others. There were the Bakersfield doctors. Dr. Erickson.
Erickson, yes.
I don't know how many times that video was removed and then re-uploaded.
I was very impressed with what they actually said and how they very meticulously and technically explain things, because I can understand that coming from the nuclear industry. You know, they were just working with statistics.
Absolutely.
And facts.
They kept saying we're seeing lots and lots of patients, small amount of death.
Yeah.
Lots and lots of patients, small amount of death.
Yeah. And this is what actually ended up happening throughout the world.
What they also questions was the rationality of these lockdown measures that they were having in America. And I picked up on the fact that they were saying you can do, I don't know what they were saying, you can buy a bottle of mineral water at Costco and the virus lives on plastic for 3 days. And I thought, where have they got this information from? I'm hearing this everywhere. The virus lives on plastic for 3 days. So I went and had a look at the surface viability of this virus, which was really bugging me. I mean, here...
Because you would need to know that it is the virus on it to begin with. I mean, that's almost impossible to do.
I don't even know how they do these studies.
I don't think it's technically
possible. I saw the information that was... I found one study on World Health website that compared SARS-CoV-1 with SARS-CoV-2. Don't ask me how they did it, but a quick look at the paper showed me it was all experimental. I found another paper on the National Institute of Communicable Diseases that was a review paper of 40 other studies, none of which was coronavirus 19. They were other coronaviruses, and it was all experimental and highly controlled.
Yeah. Or they probably use the PCR test to do it. It's the only way or means that I can think of that
possibly.
They would use.
I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I wouldn't even know how they
otherwise you would have to go and isolate each sample. And I mean, that's a mission. I remember when one of the professors involved on the MAC team, actually the Ministerial Advisory Committee, said they managed to isolate the virus in South Africa. And there was this big celebration that they managed to isolate this novel coronavirus, as they called it. But they never explained the processes that they followed, but they made it as if it was this long, complicated, big deal. Now, if it was so complicated, how would you do these tests you're speaking of? that seems almost impossible.
I have given it some thought, but I'm not a scientist, and I must be quite honest, I have no idea how they do this. Okay. What I do know is that we do not live in an experiment. And I don't know of any respiratory viruses that you pick up mainly from surfaces. All respiratory viruses are picked up droplet transmission, direct transmission, coughing and sneezing. They talk about aerosol hanging in a room. Yes, maybe that's a possibility. I know that flu can be transmitted.
Yeah.
I had a case of flu here that picked up his illness from a colleague that he was traveling to work with. So they were traveling in a closed car. Yeah. So that's how you can pick up respiratory viruses.
Yes.
Unless you're very unfortunate, you're not going to pick up a virus by touching a surface.
But we know now the World Health Organization actually said that if you're asymptomatic, you're not transferring the virus.
Well, Maria van Kerkhove went, she was online, and this is what she said. It's still very what was the word she used? Unusual for the virus to be spread asymptomatically. She was asked twice to repeat what she said.
Because the world was locked down because of the belief that even asymptomatic people were transferring.
Yes, I know. This has been used to spread fear. I also know that World Health retracted what Maria van Kerkhove said a day later, saying this was not what was meant. Well, what she said was very clear.
Yes, very clear.
And she repeated it just as clearly another 2 times.
Which means there's an agenda. I mean, there has to be an agenda if you...
Well, if the whole world goes into lockdown for a virus that is a respiratory virus, that we've been told is very deadly and turns out not to be so. There has to be an agenda.
Yeah.
The method of subduing this population using fear is actually ingenious. You have a virus that you cannot see and you cannot verify. But what most people can see now is that we haven't seen bodies piling up. Our own field hospital, Cape Town International Conference Centre, was closed several weeks ago. The mortuary that was built, able to house 9,000 bodies, was equally closed.
But all that money was wasted.
Well, this wouldn't be the first time that money was wasted.
Because I did a video yesterday on Panda, and their stats actually contradicting that of Stellenbosch University.
Yes.
And how the stats were just completely off, because
I saw the Panda report. I have it printed in my box.
And how do you feel about that?
How do I feel about it?
Yeah.
It's outrageous.
Yeah.
It's absolutely outrageous, which is why I'm sitting here.
Yeah. And I really wish, I've only had one other professional in the medical industry speak out to me openly about what is happening, and he felt so isolated because the other people in the medical profession weren't willing to say anything, and he says, but we were taught these things, how can you...
Let me quote you some figures, like I'm quoting to my patients, because the information out there is overwhelming, to say the least. But there's a few figures that you can use just as a comparison. Roughly 60,000 people died from TB last year. The official coronavirus figures that we have are about 15,000.
Now, since last month. Yeah.
Yes. The influenza virus, official figures last year was about 12,000 people dying from influenza. So I don't know why we don't have influenza. Maybe they're in the COVID, or maybe we haven't had a lot of influenza because the schools have been closed. They are the main transmitters. That's the other possibility. But the fact remains is that we're not sitting with a deadly disease that is worse than other diseases, that notably TB, that we're dealing with every single year. We won't even mention HIV.
Yeah. And it's just, you don't see beware of TB on the signposts on the roads or anything like that.
We deal with this every year without masks, social distancing, lockdown, economy destroyed, none of these measures. I've had patients coming to me telling me that somebody committed suicide and was labeled as COVID on the death certificate. I've had 2 patients telling me that. I had one patient asking me where all the other diseases have gone, and he wasn't a highly educated one. Where have all the other diseases gone? We only hear of COVID. I said, no, obviously they're all still there.
Yes.
And I see them.
Yeah. How have you experienced people actually coming to your practice during this time? I mean...
well, various ways. Some people sit here with their masks on and then whip it off as soon as they sit in front of me. Others prefer to wear their masks. I've had one coming in here with mask and visor. Yeah. And some people come without masks.
So all sorts. But people still come to see you Because I've heard that some of the hospitals stopped getting people coming there because they're too afraid
That
to actually
happened.
go to the hospitals or
The
go to the
hospitals
GPs.
were empty.
Yeah.
They cancelled all the operations. They cancelled scheduled cases. It was difficult to get anyone referred. Things are slowly changing. I think they're starting to get back to normal, and I heard from a sister yesterday, she works in a private hospital, that they are now starting to deal with the backlog and they're working overtime.
Okay.
Yeah.
So people are starting to go to hospital again.
Yes.
Well, you can see there's cars on the road everywhere, so
Yes.
the buzz is back. And I believe that we're back to level 1 lockdown, as they call it, which they said is the new normal.
I don't see why we should have a new normal.
Yeah, nothing really changed, has it? Except for government implementation for what the World Health Organization put on in our laps.
Well, the new normal being masks that interfere with communication.
Okay.
I don't know what benefits they have in the general population. I was taught to wear a mask in theatre. I wouldn't question that, and I would wear my mask, but I don't see any point of people exercising wearing masks. Walking outside in the open wearing masks.
In a nature reserve. Do you
Why
know
have
that
the
nature reserve?
Yes.
And you must sanitize before you enter the nature reserve. And you must book online, because someone cannot be at the office to actually write out a permit for you to go and hike. So if you don't have the internet, you can't go and hike in a nature reserve now.
Well, we have had so many regulations that are nonsensical.
But many doctors have said this around the world.
Yes.
Even the MAC, the professionals on the MAC have said that we should have been at level 1 2 months ago. They've said that we need to open up to level 1, and I believe the government said at the time, the president said that we were at level 4 at the time. The MAC said go to level 1. They said they decided to go to level 3 to go in between what the World Health Organization wanted, which was to stay at level 4 and level 1. So our own professionals, they didn't want to listen to, and I don't understand this. South African professionals.
Yes. They're giving advice only. It doesn't mean that the advice is being taken.
Now, how do you think GPs in general have been affected during this time? Because you could keep on practicing. All GPs could carry on practicing,
yes,
right?
seeing that we're essential services. From what I've heard from a GP group that I'm in, is that a lot of doctors have not seen many patients. It's the work volume has decreased. People were too afraid to come. I also had chronic patients that were too afraid to come.
And that's serious, because they need chronic medication.
Yes, I had one. I said, you need to come in and see me. I phoned her. She did come, and I think she's now relaxed about, or more relaxed about these masks. And
how do you feel about the fact that so much fear was created for something that wasn't as serious? Well,
it's outrageous.
because doesn't that affect how people feel and even their health? Isn't your health affected by a lockdown, your immunity system? I mean,
we've had mass hysteria created. People have been brainwashed into being fearful. Not all of us, but a lot of us. Because of misinformation. Well, we know about the collateral damage of lockdown.
yeah, it's severe.
People get depressed, people get anxious. I've had people here, depression, anxious. People have lost their jobs.
Yeah, many. I think when you're so stressed over your work, the fact that you, especially people with their own businesses, I mean, I have a friend that actually contracted the virus. His wife is a nurse, and he's a fit person, but he was so stressed out over his work that he actually ended up in hospital for 2 weeks, and he felt like he was isolated there.
Yes, he was isolated.
Like he was just left there, and
Yeah.
he said every now and then, he said the people came, peeked around the corner to see if he's still alive. That's how he felt. His family wasn't allowed to see him at all. I mean,
Yes, it's outrageous what happened.
how
Absolutely
is that
outrageous.
something that helps you to get better as a person?
No, obviously it doesn't. We need social cohesion.
Hmm.
I mean,
So what would you recommend the government do right now? What would you like to see as a GP that would speak to the public and say, this is what would help you to just live a healthy life?
spreading real information and spreading the truth.
Okay.
Instead of having these posters up, keep your distance, wash your hands, wear your mask, over 55, stay home.
Mm-hmm.
The real figures should be propagated.
But the real figures are there.
But people are not looking at it because they've been brainwashed into just believing what,
So
what
people
information
aren't-
is being sent their way.
Yeah, so it's not being put into context, basically.
No,
for
that
them.
also not. Nobody puts things into context. If I tell my patients, say, put this into context. This is how many flu cases we had last year. This is how many TB cases we have every single year. Then they look at me in amazement.
So it is about information.
Absolutely, and context of information.
But then I think it's important if we can get more doctors to speak out, or more medical professionals to speak out about how they feel. I think this is important. And the public, they want information. I mean, the people that follow me on my YouTube channel, there's over 19,000 of them now, probably 19,500 people that want proper information. They want truth. They're
Yes.
not going to mainstream media anymore for information. A lot of them say that we'll rather wait for you to give your take on Cyril Ramaphosa's speech instead of watching the speech themselves. So there is this change in society starting to happen.
You need to know who you can trust. And if your followers are waiting for you to put out information rather than watching the speech itself, it means that they trust you to put out real information and they trust your perspective on it.
This is one of the reasons why I don't want to put out anything that is sensational on my channel. It is fact driven only. It's information. I just want to give people information.
It needs
That's all.
to be, after this massive drive worldwide of misinformation, we need to get back to real information.
It seems to become a big thing now. The fact that there's alternative media, people call it, on YouTube, on Facebook, but
Yes.
a lot of it does get censored, especially around this topic. So censorship is a problem, and people are trying to come up with all sorts of ways and means to get around it. But in the end, you can actually still speak to people. You see patients, you have family and friends that you can speak to.
I do.
And I encourage everyone
But I have
to
a
do
very
that.
small audience.
Yes. And we need larger audiences somehow.
We do.
Because there's millions of people in this country that are still living in fear. And when I see that fear, I'm very sad, because they've actually changed their lives. They are really fearful. They think the chances of them dying is really high. And me not having a mask on is a threat to their life, and this is how it's being portrayed.
Yes, I'm aware of that. There's two tools being used. The one is fear and the other one is guilt.
Guilt, yeah,
It's your fault if somebody else gets infected.
That's actually quite interesting, because the guilt side is not something I've looked at extensively.
But that's exactly what happens.
The guilt side specifically.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people do feel guilty based on their Facebook posts, but I believe a lot of these Facebook posts say that, we could cause someone else's death, but this is a part of life. I mean, this happens all the time, doesn't it? With TB, no one is telling us to wear masks for TB, and people are dying from TB. We're spreading TB all the time, aren't we?
Only those that are actually infected with TB.
Yeah.
But there is open TB in the community, and
but we're not all wearing masks.
No, we've got the highest incidence in the world here in the Western Cape, TB. The problem is that all the other diseases were not focused on. It was extremely difficult.
Yeah.
People didn't get follow-up treatment at the day hospitals. I don't think they did their TB management properly. HIV management would have been affected, everything.
Even at the clinics, I know I've spoken to people that stood in queues at the clinics, and what actually happened at these clinics, and how at the clinics people were standing in the hot sun or sometimes in the rain waiting outside because they couldn't all be inside the building.
Yes, I'm aware of that.
And I'm thinking, how on earth is this good for them?
Well, some people didn't. They decided to rather visit a private GP to get their treatment or a script.
There's, to me, a lot that has been wrong with this entire picture. And to me, the biggest problem with the picture in South Africa now is the fact that professionals in South Africa, professional doctors, specialists and so on, that were on the Ministerial Advisory Committee were not listened to by government. The government listened to outside unelected bodies, non-South Africans. And our president actually said that the top experts of the World Health Organization came to sort out South Africa.
Yes, we saw the pictures.
So why would they focus on South Africa? Why would they bring the top world health experts here?
That is a good question.
That to me is fascinating, and I'm trying to understand the reasoning behind this. And our president also said that we are part of many vaccine development tests at this stage, including us developing our own vaccine and then being part of tests for other countries, especially Britain, that there are other tests that we're involved in, and they were paying people to actually take the vaccine as part of the tests.
Yes, there's a number of vaccines. I don't know the details of all of them.
Yeah, I don't want to go into too much detail on vaccines, but I mean, what are your thoughts?
Well, I have two thoughts. I think two questions should be asked. Number one, is a vaccine necessary?
Okay.
And then number two, is it safe?
Okay, I think those are two very important questions. Now, would you think a vaccine is necessary? I mean, for the flu season, you get flu shots. Would you call that a vaccine?
Yes, it's a vaccine.
Okay. And how effective is that? I mean, I have no idea actually.
Moderately effective.
Okay, so I don't get flu shots myself at all.
I stopped getting flu shots a number of years ago.
Okay.
Well, our immune system develops in the first few years of life.
Well, I was eating mud at a very young age.
Well, you know, there's a saying in Afrikaans, wat nie dood maak, maak vet. So, yeah, we know that kids get sick a lot until they're about school-going age.
Okay.
So they have a developing immune system.
So
our immune system protects us and deals with most illness.
Okay. But there are obviously certain things that come along that is serious and can compromise us. And in this case, this is the picture that was painted around the world. That the risk of dying was high, you said as high as 4%. And that's certainly high enough to make you think that you need to take action.
Yes, absolutely.
And this is why most of us were willing to, in the first 3 weeks.
Yes, because we didn't know what threat we were dealing with.
Yes, exactly. But after 3 weeks, I certainly had seen enough evidence in stats to know after the 3 weeks when the lockdown was extended, and I remember all the political party leaders stood behind Cyril Ramaphosa the first time and the second time when he announced the extension of the lockdown to show support from Parliament at the time. And then because of that, the people buy in.
Yeah.
The people bought into all of that. And it's interesting that people have been taught to trust. You were speaking about school earlier, have been taught to trust everything that government tells them.
Yes.
And everything the media tells them. That's where you get your truth. So how do we change this narrative? Because clearly now livelihoods have been destroyed, not because of the virus, but because of government implementing things that...
we need to educate people.
So it's a massive education drive.
We need to educate people and empower them with truth.
So we need a lot more people interviewing professionals around the country and having professionals speak out their truth. I mean, how else do we do it?
One needs to look at the way information is generally spread. We have a health system that is spreading information and also misinformation. I don't know how to fix that.
Yeah. I suppose we need to get people to look at other forms of truth. Because you have to decide.
Other ways of spreading information and truth.
But all ways of spreading information and truth now is being monitored by what I can see.
Not everything is being censored.
Yes,
I mean,
that's
I
true.
saw through the censorship, even though nobody told me, I could just see the videos being removed, and they would simply be re-uploaded.
Yeah.
So the information was still getting out.
Or put on websites. But now I've heard that websites have been shut down.
Okay, I haven't heard that.
Yeah, there are certain websites that have been shut down, as far as I know. But it's interesting to see. At this stage, I think we're still very free in this country, actually.
I'm following a channel that sent me an email saying, that said, please supply an email address in case this channel gets taken down.
So people can just email the information around.
Yes, so I supplied an email address.
Well, that makes sense. It still becomes cumbersome because now
it's very cumbersome.
But somehow we need to keep on trying.
I had, there's one channel which I follow that said we should form small groups and link up and spread information that way.
Well, in my tour around the country, that's exactly what we recommend happens, and the people actually do form groups in their areas on social media platforms to discuss things with each other. So that's certainly happening, and I think it's automatically happening without me even doing that in areas. People are starting to link up again in their communities, and I think it's as a result of what has happened. So I suppose human nature will start to take over.
Yes. If we're allowed to do that.
Well, that is always the question. And this is where I'm concerned with something President Cyril Ramaphosa said yesterday, that there's an app that we all must download, he said. It's called the COVID Alert. And I haven't seen this application because I certainly won't download it. But he said that it's safe and that you can't be monitored or tracked and traced with it. But then he said that you would be notified if you're in close proximity to someone else that has been tested positive for the virus.
Well, I can't see the purpose of being notified of someone tested positive who's not actually sick.
Yeah, so you don't see any point in that.
I see no point in that. I know that they use the COVID app in Germany. I don't think it's taken off to any great extent. I know that they're using a COVID app in China. I saw a video on that.
Okay.
That would alert someone if you are, I don't know, green, yellow or red.
Thank you very much for watching this video with us, and thank you for subscribing to this channel. If you have not yet, please subscribe to this channel and click the bell icon so you can get notifications for future videos. And once again, I want to thank Dr. Beate Setzer for giving South Africans this perspective in this interview, her perspective and her reality. Thank you so much for watching.